Okay, and again, I'm not a doctor. I don't claim to be. This is just advice, and you're free to take it or leave it, either way. So, one of the things that seemed to me like could be a potentially emergency type situation is a rabid dog or a rabid animal. As we know, zoonotic diseases are increasing, and or at least they seem to be. And in the U.S., I read the bats are the main carriers, although uh, raccoons and skunks and of course dogs can be a big problem. But there are so many uh, documented cases of people actually being cured from rabies before, I mean, without the treatments. Ethiopia, they did a case study. They have three natural remedies over there that people would use, and they found that the three natural remedies that the natural healers would use were just about as efficacious as the rabies shots. But the big deal is, of course, you've got to wash the wound out immediately with soap and water, and then you've got to start these treatments immediately. So the three, I didn't bother to include the other two because from Ethiopia because we don't have them over here as far as I can tell. Uh, but we're going to start with Elecamp. Well, the three that we have here are Elecamp, Lobelia, and the one that we share with Ethiopia is the spiny amaranth, the bigger picture here. Um, there will have to be further research. I've gone as far as I can on at this point on finding how to deal with amaranth specifically. The information that the article included was the seed kernel is buried under a fire source, in other words, in a warm area for 7 days, and then 1 teaspoon taken with whey. And I found it very interesting that not only that remedy, but the Elecamp, they both involve dairy products. And that's very interesting to me. And of course, increasing vitamin C and then dropping a tincture of echinacea into the puncture wound would be very, very helpful as well. On the top right, that's Elecamp. As far as I can tell, it doesn't grow anywhere around me. Lobelia, you can actually get that from the nurseries, and then spiny amaranth will grow. It's also called spiny pigweed or pigweed. It grows everywhere. I just had a huge one in my garden, and so good. Um, so Elecamp, again, you can buy it commercially. I just don't know where it grows as a wild herb right now. There was an article in the Progressive Farmer dated 331 of 1886. The incident happened in Maryland. People were bitten by rabid dogs, specifically young people, and the fellow that wrote the article, he wrote like it's a matter of course, like everybody knew this. You take a 1.5 ounce of the green root, you slice or bruise it, put it in a pint of milk, boil it down, and I can't see to what because of the pictures, but that's all right. And then you drink it. You fast 6 hours. The following morning, on an empty stomach, you repeat it. Fast for at least, I think it was another 6 hours. In that particular article, there were 5 survivors, and he knew of many, many more that when they were bitten by a rabid dog, they would do this, and there were absolutely no problems. So I found that very, very fascinating. Lobelia, you steep 1 tablespoon in 1 pint of boiling water. Drink as much as possible to induce vomiting to cleanse the stomach, and then follow that up with a high enema of Lobelia and catnip. And that also, I didn't read any anecdotal um, stories as to how that worked, but it's got a different modality, but it seems very logical that cleansing the stomach and kind of a purge would be very helpful. And then of course vitamin C and those things would be really, really helpful. So I found that really encouraging. Burns happen all the time, and again, there's so many things that can cause burns that we might be running into. Number one is immerse or surround with ice water, snow, ice, something until that burning stops. It's my understanding that until that burning stops, the skin is actually, the tissue is actually still being damaged. Not quite so quickly, but you definitely want to um, keep it really, really cool until that burning sensation stops to reduce the trauma to your body, to your skin. If a large area is burnt, you want to, um, boy, I wish I knew how to move all our pictures. Oh, that's nice. Okay. Give cool tea. Obviously, you would steep it hot and then cool it down. 3 parts skullcap, 2 parts valerian, 1 part hops. That will help prevent shock. And I'm sure that is a helpful recipe no matter what might be inducing the shock. If it's first or a second degree burn, wild Oregon grape root, golden seal root, they contain berberine, which is the healing aspect of those herbs. Goldenrod, knotweed, honeysuckle. You can either use the dry product ground to a fine dust and dusted over, or you can do a clean wet compress. And here's a different recipe for that. Knotweed, honeysuckle, barberry, and then you simmer it till it reduces to 4.5 cups. Hound's tongue you can do in the same way. And then onions. Onions are so cool for burns and for open wounds. The fresh juice or freshly mashed onion, if they tested it, I believe it was in World War II. I think yes, it was the Soviets that tested it. It kills yeast, protozoa, and bacteria. So it really reduces the chances of getting infection and speeds the healing. And if you'd like, you can add poplar or plantain leaves. Also, another formulation that can help is baking soda and olive oil. That will help speed the healing and help reduce scars. So here we have pictures of these wonderful things in case you might encounter them in the wild. The left is Oregon graperoot. It's kind of a low growing plant, grows out in the woods, many parts of North America. Golden seal is the one with the little white flowers here in the middle. It's more in the eastern seaboard, and it's actually become fairly endangered because many people have wildcrafted it and sold it for to pharmaceutical companies or natural supplement companies. To the far right here we have goldenrod, which has gotten a bad rap for allergies. It's mostly ragweed, as most of us know, for the that are inducing all these allergic reactions. Goldenrod is a really good medicinal plant, and it's so pretty, but it tends to grow very much by the roadsides. So be careful to gather it in a different setting where it's not going to be as affected by pollution. The dear little plant over here on the left that is very vigorous is Japanese knotweed. I don't know if we have it here in the US. If we do, I'm thinking it's going to be more in the southeast, but you can definitely buy it and use it in your preparations. And then honeysuckle is also very, very helpful. Okay. Tannic acid is another component that really helps with burns, helps to keep the infection rate down and to help them heal as quickly as possible. So with the tannic acid, you want to use wet compresses that you make out of the tea. So you would brew a tea, I would think for like, depending on how coarse the leaves are, like the wax myrtle that's over to the right, he's got a really fibrous, thick leaf. So I would definitely brew him longer than I would the blackberry. It's got a more fragile leaf. But and some of them are, yeah, blackberry I'd probably just add to boiling water, but if I was using the root, of course, then you've got to simmer it for a while. But sumac leaves, sweet gum leaves, which you might be able to see bear a resemblance to maple, but it's a different variety. The leaves are actually smaller than bayberry or white myrtle, the bark of that. And I did not show the bark because usually we identify by the leaves and the flowers, so that will help us. Then, of course, a blackberry over in the left. Then red oak, white oak bark, which I know grows in Northern California and different places of the U.S. And there's so many different types of oak, but white oak has one of the highest tannic acid concentrations in the bark. So that's why it's more recommended. Then magnolia bark, well, at least those in California and in the Southeast are very familiar with the beautiful magnolia tree. Sassafras grows more in the Southeast. And then the fruit of the unripe persimmon. Those of us that have tried eating an unripe persimmon are very aware of the tannic acid that is in there. So you would, again, make a tea out of those, boil them, that would extract the tannic acid, and then you'd lay those on the wound, on the burn with a nice compress till it dries out, and then you would replace it. Clay is a very, very healing substance for burns. You would want to apply it as soon as possible and reduce the scars. Clay helps heal a lot of wounds, but it's really good for burns. You want, for that specific application, you would layer the over the burn, you would layer the gauze, and you'd want it slightly bigger than the wound, then the clay, and then you'd remove it in an hour. It's going to absorb all the impurities, the foreign bodies, the destroyed cells, and it enables cellular rebuilding. Those of us that have ever worked with burn patients, one of the most awful things is the debridement of the wound. And with the clay, it really, really helps with that. It's still not pleasant, but it's an easier transition with the clay. You want to repeat this morning and evening till pink tissue is evident. With acid burns, you would do clay. With alkaline burns, you would do the same process, but only with lemon water. Another thing that will help burns is zinc. You can crush the supplements, make sure that it's just zinc, not added your vitamin C or something else or colors or any of those things, and mix with olive oil, put on topically. Again, that helps reduce the scarring. And of course, good old comfrey. Comfrey root poultice, it has the allantoin, and boy, it really makes a difference. Personally, I've used the leaves, and it's been very, very helpful as well. And there's one of the pictures of comfrey right there to the right. So that'll help you identify, hopefully, a plant that can help. Let's see. Eucalyptus leaves or tea tree oil. This is a species of eucalyptus. There's so many species. Up in the right-hand corner, they both contain camphor, which is going to kill infections. And anytime you've got a third-degree burn, second to third degree, you've got so much tissue damage, and the infection rate really goes up. You also have fluid loss, especially in third degree, because those wounds are seeping. So you want to be sure that the victim is getting enough liquids internally as well. Very, very important. And liquids that will help build them up. One of the things that will help is in their diet to increase sulfur. Sulfur and methionine contains sulfur. These are both very, very important building blocks for cellular regeneration. So for the sulfur, you've got the brassica family. We all, hopefully we're all eating lots of those already. But again, increasing these in the diet is very helpful with burn victims. Broccoli, kale, cabbage, kohlrabi, garlic, watercress, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, collards, turnip greens, and they also have the added benefit of protecting us against cancer, which we probably know about. And then methionine is again, which it does contain sulfur, but it's is another type of food that we should probably be increasing in a burn situation, or any type of large amount of tissue injury. Corn, soybeans, specifically tofu, because it's more concentrated there. Comfrey, we've already gone through the. Be careful about ingesting comfrey. Nuts, beans, whole grains, all of these help again with cellular regeneration. Uh, Cabbage juice, watercress compresses are also very helpful in wound healing with the burns. They're also really soothing. And of course, you want to increase your vitamins A, D, and C to speed up healing when you've got a burn situation. In World War One, they would take sphagnum moss that had been sterilized, and I think they probably got it packaged on the battlefield, and then they saturated it with garlic juice diluted with water. They had very, very good results with that. Sphagnum moss is antibacterial because it's alkaline, and so that really made a difference. Good healing with that. You can also make poultices out of slippery elm bark, which is so soothing. So is fenugreek seed. Both of those are kind of mucilaginous, and then really, really healing. And of course, we're all aware of aloe vera gel. You would split the leaf. I didn't even put a picture on because we all know what aloe vera looks like. But you would split the leaf and carefully scrape out the gel. You don't want to get too close to the outer layer of the, well, I guess leaf is what you have to call it, because there's more irritating compounds found there. But you want to get all that nice gooey sticky gel stuff, and that's so good for a burn. So on the left we have the leaves of the slippery elm. There are so many varieties of elm. Slippery elm is a little bit more rare these days, but I think in a pinch, any elm, they all have that mucilaginous quality, just not quite to the concentration of slippery elm. So you could use it if you couldn't find slippery elm. The middle is St. John's wort, which is so useful for so many things. And then to the right is a botanical offering of what the fenugreek plant looks like. Usually we would be buying the fenugreek seed, but you can grow the herb. So garlic is also very, very effective. As I mentioned with this sphagnum moss, you do want to dilute the water, but it's also got a lot of sulfur in it. So it's a good one to ingest for helping to combat infection with the burns and to also speed healing. You can also dust the wound with the powdered product from these different herbs that I've got pictured here, or you can make a wash again out of the tea, or a poultice. Oh, I forgot the L. Sorry about that. So on the left, we have yarrow, which we talked about yesterday so much. And again, the wild one is white. And you can see how the ferniness of the leaves, but it's ferny only in appearance. It doesn't have the feel of a regular fern. Then we've got echinacea, which is so helpful. Another picture of comfrey, and you can see how, well, if you're familiar with borage, you can see the strong resemblance there. Then chaparral, which grows more in the drier southwest areas of the U.S. To the left, left bottom, we have poplar, and you want the bark. But again, we often identify by the leaves. The poplar, the quaking aspen, all these things are in that family. So in a pinch, you could use probably birch bark to a certain extent, the inner bark, not the outer bark. And then white oak bark, I did not include that again because the leaf, because we already had that one. And golden seal, I did not include. Smartweed is a little low growing, very prolific little weed that grows everywhere that I know of. And it's got these beautiful little pink flowers, kind of vivid for such a little weed, but it's very, very helpful. And then the pleurisy root is to the right, and that grows more in the open areas. And you can combine the golden seal, the smartweed, and the pleurisy root, powdered or in fomentations, compresses, washes like that, and it's a bit more efficacious because their components will work with each other in a synergistic way. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So we're into infection and gangrene. How many of well, I don't know. Gangrene is a really, really terrible thing. It's often seen as a death sentence that it will cause amputation. We see it sometimes with diabetic patients. They've stepped on something, their pain receptors aren't working, they don't know it. It's infected and it's gangrenous before they're even aware that they had a problem too many times. But gangrene can be treated. Strong infections can be treated. One of the most effective ways that is not herbal, but ozone is very effective for gangrene. I've used that effectively with a diabetic patient, and it was amazing what the treatment within a couple of 3 days, the difference that it made. It was just wow. So here's some different poultices that are very effective for infection and or gangrene. Uh, if there's pus or ulceration, any places where the skin is eroded away, use warm hydrogen peroxide, wipe it with cotton, and then rinse it with pure water. You don't want to ever leave hydrogen peroxide as the last thing on the skin. It's not, yeah, if there's any moisture, it will continue to eat away, sometimes even at healthy tissue. So we don't want to do that. So 1/4, this is a good poultice, a 1/4 pound charcoal. So we might be making our own if we're using a 1/4 pound. 1 ounce smartweed. Boy, that's a typo. Put it in the pan. Oh my, sorry about that. I'll fix this before I share it with Sandy. Pour 1 pint of boiling water over it, cover and let it steep 20 minutes. Then mix in 2 tablespoons of whole wheat flour and enough more dry charcoal to make the poultice. You may add 1 tablespoon of lobelia when you're steeping the herbs if the wound is painful. Lobelia is a painkiller, which is really, really helpful. And you may add a small amount of flaxseed meal or cornmeal so that it sticks together better. So you, again, put a little larger gauze than the area, then the poultice, then another layer of gauze, and then the bandage. A different poultice that works well is 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed, 1 tablespoon of golden seal, 1/2 teaspoon myrrh. Add enough hot water to make a paste and not too stiff because you want it to be able to kind of seep into the wound. And you want to renew those poultices every 6 hours and clean each time before reapplying if pus appears. We did a mission trip to Belize once, and it was a medical missionary endeavor as well as, excuse me, Maranatha building and doing VBS. Excuse me. And I was privileged to meet an elderly man that was diabetic, and he was struggling with a wound on his ankle. And at the hospital, they had given him a silver solution that was working pretty well, but he couldn't pay for it, and he couldn't go back to the hospital to get more. And so the gentleman that was with us had some golden seal and echinacea. So I would just sprinkle the powder on his wound. And I did that twice a day while we were there. Well, I met him into it. So I was able to do it for about a week. He was healing really well by the time we left. And he wasn't managing his diabetes that well at all, but he was still healing well. And I continued to send it from the US until he was healed. And so, yeah, it's really, really helpful. Again, just golden seal and echinacea is a good dust for these things. You internally, to build up the immune system, to help stimulate so that you're healing from the inside out as well. Equal parts skullcap, valerian, yellow dock, buckthorn bark. These are the pictures that you have here. On the left is skullcap. I think the picture is big enough that maybe you can see that it's part of the mint family. Then you have valerian, which is good for, well, both of those are calming herbs, skullcap and valerian. Yellow dock is just really, it's got a lot of vitamin C. And again, this is a weed that you probably have seen all over the place. The seeds can be harvested and made a flour out of it, but you would want, well, my information didn't say if you use the leaf or the root. I'm hoping you use the leaf because getting that root out is a pain in the neck. And then the last one is buckthorn bark, and I have never seen that growing. I would have to purchase that if I was going to be using that. And then you would add a heaping teaspoon of the mixture to a cup of boiling water. Take 1 cup at least 1 hour before each meal and 1 cup before bed. And that's really going to boost your ability to heal. And you would probably also be eating the brassicas and the other things that we had in the for the burns. So the last is for the best, as far as I'm concerned, for infection and gangrene. We've all seen, I think, old man's beard, and his name is usnea. The usnic acid is a potent antibiotic and antifungal chemical, so it seems like it would be good for burns as well. Found. It was traditionally used as a bandage due to these properties. In an emergency situation, it could be used as the only bandage because it's just that strong of an antiseptic. You could perhaps use it in combination with balsam fir sap, which is also a topical painkiller, and saps, as most of us know, are kind of an adhesive. You could use that to secure it to the wound, keep it clean, safe from infection, and reduce pain. However, remember in our first aid kit, we do have tape and bandages, so we might not have to resort to that. It would be a little bit quicker if we didn't have to. Usnic acid has been found to be extremely effective against microbes, staphylococcus, streptococcus, pathogenic fungi. It's also antiviral, antiprotozoal, antimitotic, anti-inflammatory, and again, it has its own analgesic properties. Doesn't this sound like a wonderful thing that God has given us? It is not it is not a plant. It's actually a combination of a lichen, and I can't think of the other thing. But anyways, I'll remember, I hope. These characteristics allow old man's beard. It's far superior in backwoods bandaging. I said sphagnum moss was alkaline. It's acidic, and that's what makes it antimicrobial. My bad. My apologies. So yeah, it's far superior. It is wonderful stuff. One of the ways that you can identify it, maybe I've already got that down, but in case oh dear. Okay. The ways you can identify it, there are counterfeits, but it's to me they don't look that much like old man's beard, but I suppose if you're new to foraging, you could be fooled. But for old man's beard, when you pull on it, it's kind of elastic, and if you pull on it hard enough, you'll see the inner white fiber, but it'll bounce before it'll break. And it's not like elastic. It's not that strong of a bounce, but it's a gentle bounce. These are small fibers, but that's how you identify it definitively against lookalikes. It's an antiviral. It also inhibits Epstein-Barr virus and the herpes simplex virus. And I wonder about COVID. I don't know. It's also antifungal. So candida, athlete's foot, jock itch, dandruff, ringworm, vaginal infections. It's an immune stimulant. It strengthens the body's response to infection. While it's inhibiting the bacteria and other pathogens, you can treat the surface wounds topically, like we said. You can powder it, like we talked about some of these other herbs, and apply it directly to a wound. The tincture that you can make from it, and we're going to go over how to make this tincture. It's a little bit different than some of the others because it's not a leafy plant. It's a different component, made up differently, the lichen and the other thing that I can't think of. The tincture can be diluted and used to clean wounds or for skin infections like impetigo, staph, coccus, cellulitis, infected wounds. Use it as a gargle for sore throats. Doesn't it just, wow, this just, I find this so exciting. I love this plant. Oh, did I? Okay. It's also used, these are great pictures. You can see on the left-hand side those little fibers that I was talking about that you can pull on and see if it's elastic or not. And it's often on a branch with regular lichen, almost always, in fact. You can use it for weight loss, pain relief, fever control, wound healing, to make phlegm easier to cough up. It's also used directly on the skin for sore mouth and throat. It's an immune system tonic that can be used in acute situation as well as for long-term immune enhancement and general prevention. Now that's different than echinacea. Echinacea you don't want to use long-term. It loses its effectiveness, but usnea doesn't. It has no side effects or contraindications, safe for children, safe for animals, can be used along with or instead of echinacea, more specific for strep and staph than echinacea, and its antibiotic properties are most specific to the respiratory and urinary systems. I find it very exciting. I'm allergic to penicillin, and this is like right up there, even by the medical reports. It's right up there with penicillin for its effectiveness. And as we all know, as time goes on, the antibiotics are becoming less and less effective. Usnea is not in that category. It's not going to lose its effectiveness. So really, really exciting stuff there from my perspective. Oh, yeah. So with usnea, you chop it into small sections, and for this recipe, you only use about an ounce or the amount you can fit in the palm of your hand. Place it in a mason jar. Pour just enough water over it till it's all covered. And this is also a process that you can use with some other herbs, or it's loosely like that process, but this one is pretty specific because usnea is not water soluble, generally speaking. And even with a alcoholic tincture, it's not, which alcohol is usually like the best for pulling out the components. It's not as efficacious. This is the recommended method. The next one would be alcohol. So stir and cap the jar tightly. Place a dishcloth in the bottom of your crock pot or cooking pot. This will keep the mason jar from superheating and burning your material. Place your jar on top of it. Now fill your cooking pot or crock pot with water till it reaches the top of the pot or comes within an inch of the top. That's usually what we call the shoulder of the jar. Turn the heat on low. This will result in a strong decoction. Decoction's like a step up from a tea. Let this sit in your crock pot for a day. You may need to burp the jar multiple times a day to relieve pressure. Do not put cold liquids into or onto the hot jar, as many of us would know it would cause the glass to crack or explode. On day 2, remove the jar, let it cool. Once cool, open your jar, add roughly 2 shot glasses of vodka or brandy, more if you've used more usnea. Stir and cap it tightly. Place it back in, let it sit for 6 days on low. Remove it once a day, let it cool. And while it's cooling down, add more water to your cooking pot to bring it back up to that level of and by now you should know, you can mark it, where that level will be about shoulder height on the jar. Continue to burp the jar occasionally to relieve any pressure. Once it's cooled a bit, return it to the crock pot. Now let's see if I can get this. When 6 days are up, remove the jar, let it cool, strain it. The plant material or the lichen should now look brown and smell herby. Discard that you can do that in the compost and store it in a dark bottle in a cool, dry place. Then you've got it. I'm also planning, I've been harvesting it for quite a few weeks now, and I'm going to dry some and powder it. Okay, going back. Oh, huh. I thought I had another page on Usnea. I may have gotten them mixed up. But anyways, Usnea, you want to gather it. It absorbs pollution, so you want to gather it in a pristine area, and don't gather it from the trees if it can all be helped. They take hundreds of years to grow. Right now, well, at least here it's very, very windy. I'm gathering all I want from the ground, and again, it's antibacterial. It's not going to hurt it to be on the ground. Sure, I'm going to rinse it off, but it's not like it's really making it unusable because it fell on the ground. So, yeah, it's all over here. I can't even see it growing in the trees, but it's all over the ground. So I'm picking it up and gathering it that way. And again, I've hiked in California, many different places. It's readily available on the ground almost year round. So strong recommendation there. Willow pain management. Pain management can be a big deal in an emergency situation if we're not able to optimally receive medical services. So willow bark is one of them. We're all aware of aspirin, which was originally derived from willow bark. But like aspirin, it can cause stomach acid. It may be hard on your kidneys. It can prolong bleeding time because it also has an anticoagulant factor. So we want to be careful how we manage that. You don't want to just be gnawing on willow bark or making a tea out of willow bark all the time. If you're sensitive to aspirin or take any of the over-the-counter anti-inflammatory drugs like aspirin, ibuprofen, or naproxen, or the blood thinner warfarin, Coumadin, or any other anticoagulant treatments, you don't want to be doing willow bark. It can increase the risk of bleeding, and it can interact negatively with these others, the ibuprofen and the naproxen. Another good pain management tool is turmeric because it reduces inflammation. Cayenne is kind of like a counter irritant, and you can make really great salves out of that for back, muscle pain, joint pain. Comfrey is really making comfrey poultices are really, really good for any kind of joint pain or that kind of thing. Heat or ice, not really herbal, but really important. Many of you know my husband Don, and he struggled over the years with back pain, and he just recently had a really terrible bout with it, and he always preferred heat. Well, the chiropractor was adamant that he used ice. Well, guess what? That pain just really went away really quickly, so that was great. And not quickly, well, quickly temporarily. How's that? Pain management, again, just like Usnea's, comfrey is one of the go-tos. Usnea is a go-to. Wild lettuce is one of the newer go-tos for pain management. It actually has opiate-like qualities without being addicting or the negative things that we associate with opiates. And it's the milky substance. Most of us are aware of, like if we've grown romaine lettuce or dandelion, or we've probably come across wild lettuce, we've seen that white sappy stuff. And the chemicals lactocin and lactocuprocin, they are the ones that are responsible for the pain-killing properties. And the active molecules in the sap, they produce a relaxing, sleeping, soothing physical effect. And this has been proven time again. Lately, it's obviously something that our forefathers knew, but the understanding has been lost, and it's coming back. Consumers of wild lettuce, and you can get it commercially, they tend to use the herb to ease the body into a relaxed state. After a long day of pressure and expectations, it can help promote a restful night's sleep with its unique characteristics. It can soothe the nerves, lull the mind into serenity. It also promotes normal menstruation. Just like all these other herbs, they have multiple applications and strong antibacterial qualities, which is always so helpful. So on the left, you have the wild lettuce. And any of you that have seen romaine that's bolted, maybe you can see that similarity. I do. And it's got a very similar, pleasant moisture to the leaves as that romaine has. And then the flower is in the middle. You can see also its resemblance to dandelion, but it is not dandelion. It doesn't have that fuzzy middle, and the petals are actually separated differently and a little bit more distinct. But it definitely has a resemblance. And to the right is prickly lettuce, not the wild lettuce. We want the wild lettuce. Prickly lettuce may have some of these qualities, but not to the extent that the wild lettuce does. So that's why I included that. We want the plant on the left, not the one on the right. Uh-oh. Where did we go? I don't know what I did wrong, but obviously something. I knew what I did wrong. I can fix it quicker. Oh, that's my last slide. That's why it was there. Okay. Trying to get rid of this. There we go. So I have not finished the slides because I want to put the recipe in for wild lettuce. It's pretty specific as the usnea one is, and it's pretty involved as the usnea is. First, you have to gather the plant, then you put it in the blender, then you put it in the crock pot, and then you strain it a couple of times, and then you dry it out. So it is pretty labor intensive, but boy, is it worth it, because pain management is huge. If you've got somebody in pain, it's very challenging to deal with the rest of the aspects that might need attention as to their injuries. So pain management is really, really helpful. And again, if somebody's having trouble sleeping, it could be helpful as well. So that's what I had to present for today. Hopefully it was a blessing. Let's have closing prayer, and then Joseph, I wanted to address what you